Welcome to the class. Today we are going to talk about certain terms which are helpful in making our speech or writing effective and impressive. As we understand, to make our speech effective through making our language effective, in the process of making our language flawless, error-free. These are our goals. We are trying to develop accuracy for the purpose of developing confidence, which comes through effective language and if making our expressions effective is the goal of communication. In order to do that, in order to do so at this stage, I plan to introduce few terms, few phrases, few things to you, and paying attention to them takes your sentence structure, your vocabulary and expression to the next level, and you feel more comfortable, you feel more equipped to deal with formal situations of writing as well as formal and informal situations of speaking. At the same time, you also get equipped with understanding what others mean, what others try to say, and how others use these terms in their language. These terms are essentially adverbial terms. There are some phrases and some prepositional phrases and so on. As you know, prepositional phrases are all adverbial in nature, mostly adverbial in nature. So, we are going to look at some of them and we are going to see how we use them in sentences, and their larger function in a sentence is as a marker of discourse, and that's what we are saying, connecting ideas. Basically, we are talking about connecting sentences, connecting clauses and connecting ideas which are expressed in two different sentences. How do we connect them? Because connecting the two helps us build the discourse. As you know, the units of language are sounds, then we go to words, then we go to sentences. In communication, that is in communication with others, in making a point in conversations, what becomes significant is discourse. Creating a discourse and concluding the discourse in a convincing way is one of the salient goals of effective communication. How we build the discourse, how we make it attractive, influential, effective, should be the goal in communication for us. We can say something and we can make our point effectively, and people should get our point. That should be the goal. To do so, that is to work around discourse, we need to know a lot more than sentences. And this is where the rules of language use, particularly what to say and more importantly, what not to say, becomes important. In order to make a point in a formal situation, how to start, how to look effortless is also important. As you know, becoming effortless, that is, appearing effortless in a normal communication for effectiveness takes a lot of efforts to prepare, to work, and thus to reach that point. So, these are some of the important things to keep in mind. Language-wise, some of these items that we are going to discuss today are going to help us build our discourse. And let's play around these to take a look at them and see how they works, how these elements work. So we are basically talking about connecting ideas, that is the point here. By ideas we mean points, that is within a sentence or between two sentences. There are certain terms which can be used to connect certain points within a sentence, that is intrasentential, and beyond a sentence, that is between two sentences, and so on. So if you look at this example, there was no AC in the building. As a result, the workers had to be sent home. So this marker, as a result, connects the two sentences that there was no AC in the building. This is one point. The workers had to be sent home. This is another point. You put them together, it still makes sense, and we can infer the connection that because there was no AC in the building, the workers had to be sent home. But there are certain things like a phrase such as a result of, as a result of which, as a result. When we use these things, then this is called the discourse marker, which connects the proposition that the workers had to be sent home with the previous one. So as a result, makes the previous sentence pre-existing condition for doing what is being said in the second sentence. That's how we mark the discourse. Hear me out one more time. When we say as a result, we are connecting two sentences by making the previous one precondition. That is, what we want to say in the second sentence is predicated upon the condition expressed in the previous one. So there was no AC becomes the existing condition for sending workers home. So that's the function of a phrase like this. We could go for a movie this Diwali. Alternatively, we could just stay home and enjoy sweets. Look at this word here in italics, alternatively. It's an adverb. You see this marker here, it's an adverb. As a result is also an adverb, but it's a phrase of a different type. These are two different types of phrases, but they are discourse markers. So in this sentence, alternatively helps us connect and make the previous sentence, the condition, the thing expressed in the previous sentence as an option. So we are talking about, we could go for a movie this Diwali. We could stay at home and enjoy sweets. These are the two alternatives. So we connect it with saying alternatively, as it is obvious that these are alternatives. So we can say alternatively, we could just stay home and enjoy sweets. So these are the phrases, and we can use them in our informal and formal conversations, both in writing, to make it connected, to make it impressive, and make it more readable. Also, an effective use, an appropriate use of these elements makes your writing readable, makes your audience not lose the point. And the same thing happens in spoken language as well. They have greasing effect. They make things smoother. So look at this now. Some of these sentences which, while I was waiting, I had a cup of coffee. So here we are talking about two propositions again. I was waiting, I had a cup of coffee. When I say while I was waiting, so the use of the term I was waiting, I had a cup of coffee, it sounds very monotonous and not very engaging way of speaking or writing. So if we use the term while making the first one as the condition, while I was waiting, I had a cup of coffee. I had a cup of coffee. It's also, you are also giving justification for that. Justification for buying a cup of coffee for yourself. So just it's not like I ended up buying a cup of coffee for no reasons. I was just waiting. So it was helpful in killing time, in passing time. Hence I bought a cup of coffee. So this marker while has lot of meaning. It tells the audience a lot more than we can assume, and in the absence of which it makes very crude. It's a crude presentation, it's a raw presentation. However, the use of it makes it fluid, makes it easy. I'll be wearing a sea blue shawl so that you can see me easily. So that is another phrase which connects the two and says it's contingent upon something. So I am going to wear blue shawl, and this is contingent, this is important because I want you to see me, identify me easily. So that's the purpose of this phrase. So again, at this point, take a moment and look at yourself and see whether or not you use these things, whether or not you hear when people speak these things, and when you watch television, movies, and listen to people, how effectively and how often people use these terms. Take an audio sample of 5 minutes from anywhere. Watch them couple of times. Mark a note of these markers, and not just these markers, maybe there are more in your sample. And see the purpose of why and how that speech sample is using these markers. You will get to see the more effective, the more likable a speech sample of few minutes is. And that happens because that sample is full of these things, is totally tossed in these elements to make it impressive. That's the purpose of doing this. Look at it, how we use the terms like and, but, or, so, a semicolon, or a colon, or just a hyphen. To connect ideas between sentences and to connect two clauses in the same sentence. So you understand we are working on connecting things. We are working on these things as not simple conjunction, but a connector for the marking of discourse, or for creating or building the discourse. So let's look at some of the examples. You can come up with your own examples, and I sincerely suggest you here, as I suggested the previous exercise, for you to take a 5 minutes of sample from anywhere, a speech sample, and it's not tough for you to do. However, I must underline it several times that to make your language better, do this not just as an exercise for yourself, but as a favor to yourself. You may feel you already know, you may feel you are doing that enough, but if you feel your language is still not effective, is not impressive, or you feel somewhere some urge to make your language more effective, then you don't have to wait for me to suggest you this thing. These are the ways of examining yourself and working on your own content. So you use your own examples with these connectors that I am talking about and see whether or not they become useful, they look useful to you. So building was extremely well constructed and consequently difficult to demolish. Look at this. And consequently. We are using it twice, two of them. We could simply say the building was extremely well constructed, consequently it was difficult to demolish. And consequently difficult to demolish. So after and we are simply using this as a phrase. This is not a sentence. Difficult to demolish, meaning it was difficult to demolish. We are using these two as markers of discourse. We could fly via Singapore. Look at this, colon. However, this isn't the only way. To make these two sentences within one, this is the use of a semicolon here is important. After using however, we always use a comma before introducing a new clause. So you could fly to Singapore, you could fly via Singapore, however, this is not the only way. If we are talking about travel to some place, and depending upon flight fare or connectivity or requirement of a travel in a particular way, imagine you are traveling to Los Angeles from New Delhi. There are multiple ways of going to Los Angeles. You could travel straight via Europe and cross Atlantic and go to one of the famous West Coast cities of North America, Los Angeles. Or you could go to Singapore, and from Singapore you can take a direct flight from the other side of the hemisphere, flying over Tokyo and Pacific and land on LAX, that is the International Airport of Los Angeles, which is one of the largest and famous cities on the west coast of North America. So famous cities on the east coast are like Washington and New York, and others towards the south, like Miami in Florida, etc. Same way, San Francisco and Los Angeles and many more are famous cities on the western coast of the United States. So if somebody is flying, you can say you could fly via Singapore. However, that is not the only way. So how do we need to pay attention to these things while writing. We can simply write, you could fly via Singapore, however it is not the only way. You have to put a colon, however, comma, and then the next proposition ending with a full stop, period. Now look at some of the connectors which are like comparing, contrasting, concession. So when we say between sentences, we use some of the, so these are the functions of some of the vocabulary items that we are going to discuss. So they are however, nevertheless, on the other hand, on the contrary, though, alternatively, instead, after all, in any case, in contrast, by contrast, otherwise, even so. These are some of the very useful phrases for marking discourse, for improving our language, for sounding much better in all spheres of language use. And here we don't need to make a distinction between professional use or use of English in personal domain, use of English for the purpose of writing or for the purpose of speaking. It is true that we become little casual in informal setup. However, we are conscious. Something is operating through our subconscious, and that makes us very conscious when we are using language in a formal domain. So within sentences, some of them that we use are although, though, even though, while, yet, whereas. These are some of the examples. So let's look at this. And then we have causes, reasons, purpose, results. For that we use therefore, consequently, hence, as a result of, as a consequence, in consequence, thus, as a result of, and so on. So, for adding ideas between sentences, we use things like in addition, furthermore, to, as well, likewise, similarly, moreover, what's more, also. These are, I just want you to take a list of these things and look at it carefully. We have given some examples. If we haven't, try to use these phrases in your own sentences. Make a list of your sentences. I would rather say use couple of sentences, several sentences with each one of these samples to incorporate them in your own repertoire, in your own language. And that is one way for me, one way how we make these things as part of our regular repertoire. So look at this. Time one event at the same time as another. Between sentences, we use meanwhile, at the same time, and so on. Within the sentence, we use while, as, when, whenever. And likewise, we have these examples. I want to take you. So even though is a conjunction used to say that a fact doesn't make the rest of the sentence untrue. So we use even though to connect. It is used in such a way to say that the fact that we are talking about doesn't make the rest of the sentence untrue. In contrast, it connects the ideas within a sentence. For example, even though trade unions are no longer as powerful as they used to be, look at this, even though trade unions are no longer as powerful as they used to be, comma, their political influence should not be underestimated. So, the use of even though it is to say that a fact doesn't make the rest of the sentence untrue. It's a fact. So, trade unions are no longer as powerful as they used to be. And this has nothing to do with the truth value. But what we are saying after comma is significant. Their political influence should not be underestimated. And this is what attracts attention in the uses of even though. Even so, it's a prepositional phrase, and it is used to introduce a fact that is surprising in the light of what was just said. So it connects ideas between sentences. That is, the use of even so connects ideas between the sentences. So look at this example. Much of the power of the trade unions has been lost. So we are using this several times. We are talking about trade unions. So much of the power of trade union has lost. Even so, their political influence should not be underestimated. So it is to introduce the element of the fact that is surprising. It's the element of surprise, and it connects the two sentences together for sure. The use of however, it is used to connect ideas between sentences, but also within a sentence. So the point is not to keep in mind whether it connects between sentences or beyond sentences. The point is it's a discourse marker. It's a marker that helps us say things effectively. It is followed by an adjective or an adverb such as much, many, etc. And we just don't have, if we look at the example, we just don't have the money to do the work. However necessary you think it is. So this introduces the, look at this, however necessary you think, whatever you think it is very important, but it is just that we don't have money to do the work. The work is important, but we just don't have money to do the work. It means no matter how. However, he held the mirror. He could not see the back of his neck. In whatever way, no matter how you hold the mirror, you cannot see the back of your neck. So, I mean, there are ways of doing that if you use two mirrors. So that's not the important point here. So these are some of the phrases, terms which are used as markers of discourse in our language, and they help us achieve lot of things. They help us achieve, make our discourse effective, comfortable, easy, sensible, and these are the things that we want to achieve in our communication, in our conversations. And these are the things which are going to make us legible, make us audible. People will pay attention to these things. So one more time, when we have these elements like meanwhile, at the same time, at the time, within, and while, as, when, which, however, whenever, I repeatedly tell you, we are not giving examples of them in details, but please use them in your sentences and make use of this opportunity to make a sentence or two for yourself, even for the purpose of fun. Please do it. It is going to yield result for giving you better confidence in using these things in your own language. Thank you so much. Until we meet next time, looking forward to hearing from you.